Hey guys, welcome to our first startup draft review of the offseason. I just finished my first Dynasty startup draft and I'm super stoked to share it with you guys. We got a really good group of people together here. It happens to be a Dynasty analyst league. Big shout out to David Gutierrez for putting this together and inviting me to this league. So what I want to do is I want to go through the draft a little bit, go through really a lot of my picks, go through maybe some general strategy, some positional strategy, and anything that generally stands out. So let me pull up the draft board and let's hop right into it. Okay, so first things first, this is the 12 team, full PPR, tight end premium, 1.5 tight end premium, 5 point per passing touchdown league. As I said before, this is a Dynasty Analyst League. You probably notice a lot of the names across the top if you are in the Twitterverse or X or whatever it's called at this point. Putting it out there because I do think that that means this is going to be a fairly sharp league. And just, I went through the draft. I'm the one who did it. It was a tough draft. Like, these guys were challenging to draft against. They made a bunch of pretty solid moves during the draft. You can see a ton of trades have gone on during this draft, and they put a lot of pressure on each manager to, make a difficult decision at every point in the draft. And specifically myself back at the 111, I think it was randomized 6 times and I ended up with the 111. Typically I do like drafting at the back end of the draft with a bunch of sharp guys. You know that it's going to be even more of a challenge because there's not going to be many mistakes made before your picks. So, part of being at the back end of the draft or having, double picks, being able to double tap is the advantage of potential value falling to you and being able to double tap that value, right? Which is going to be less likely when you are in a league with a bunch of people who, stick to their guns, who have good processes, who aren't going to veer too far from ADP and make, wild picks or reach too far for players. That's the kind of thing that, you look for when you're at the back end of the draft or you're on the turn. So what I think I'm going to do first is talk a little bit about my team, the picks I made, the decisions I made, maybe why I made those decisions, and if, I agree or disagree with them still to this day. Would I have done anything differently? Was it impacted by what was happening in front of me? Those kind of things. And then I'll probably talk a little bit more generally about the draft. I may do that kind of in between a little bit anyway, because I like to get a little bit too verbose probably. But my intent is to go through my team a little bit more and then highlight more specifically some, positional trends and just maybe some overall trends that stood out to me. Let's hop into it. Let me start talking a little bit about the decisions I made and why I made them. So again, this is a super flex league. Obviously, we had a big quarterback run in the first round. That's typical. Caleb Williams, the 101 as Young Wei Koo, goes at 109. So we're picking rookie picks in this draft, and we're going to have a subsequent rookie draft, post NFL draft. If Jamar Chase had made it to the 111, I probably would have taken him there and hope Anthony Richardson made it back to me, but that was probably unlikely either way. And I do have Jefferson, Chase, St. Brown, and CeeDee Lamb in the same tier as tier 1 wide receivers. So I felt like I could probably wait there and I could lock in the top end of my tier 2 quarterbacks in Anthony Richardson. I think he has that rushing upside. I think he can be an absolutely dynamic fantasy asset. So that's what I went after, the dual threat, the guy who can have that really, really elite potential. I do think that there are some other guys left that you could potentially take in this range. Maybe Jordan Love is reaching up to like the 202 spot, but I do think that Anthony Richardson is probably the last quarterback in the first round that I really want here. I'm pretty shocked Justin Fields went at 112, but listen, if you like Fields, stick to your guns. He is a pretty awesome player to watch. He's definitely got a little bit life left in him, but I don't know how much. So 112 is a little rich for my blood. 202 is kind of a no-brainer for me, as much as I believe in, securing your quarterback position, especially, your QB2. I don't want to be necessarily flailing all the time with my quarterback 2, which is something I've done and I've overcome. But it's not a fun process. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely not something I want to do. But at 202, like I said, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the last wide receiver who falls into that tier 1 of wide receivers for me. So it just kind of felt like a no-brainer. Let me just take Amon-Ra St. Brown and run with it. Now, I could have gone 102. I could have gone Bijan Robinson. But I don't think I was the only one in this draft thinking, fade running back. Bijan Robinson fell to the 211, which was a shocker. I haven't really seen that in too many drafts, but 211 is pretty late for the first running back off the board. And when I talk about positions a little bit later, highlight more, generally what I think about that. But getting back to my picks, this draft did implement third round reversal. So I did have to make the most of my 3.02. And for me, tier one running back Jahmyr Gibbs, who really I flip flop all the time in our rankings between 1 and 2. But I do understand that, doesn't necessarily have that workhorse type potential, but I don't know if that's necessarily what we need or want from our running backs. I do think he's going to get plenty of volume both in the running and receiving game to get there to be an impact fantasy player like a Bijan Robinson has the potential to be, or a Breece Hall, and what a Christian McCaffrey actually is. So I think that's the kind of player he is. So I generally go hero zero running back, and I still feel like the current dynasty landscape calls for that. I want to lock in a tier one running back if I can. Otherwise, I'm probably going to fade it. And even if I do, I'm still going to probably fade the position after that. And if you look at my draft, I did exactly that. Now, I do think that after this, I was not necessarily forced into a position, but what felt like I needed to kind of lean into a year two contender type build. Not saying that I don't have an opportunity to win this year, but I did feel like a lot of the contending pieces were taken between my third overall pick and my fourth overall pick. Specifically, wide receivers, talking about guys like Tyreek Hill, talking about the tight ends mainly, like Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, Mark Andrews. These are my tier one tight ends. These are, Mark Andrews making it to 404 is absolutely crazy. I really didn't think I had a shot at him, but I thought I had a shot at one of these guys maybe making it back to my fourth round pick, which would both give me that youth, that longevity, but also I think more potential to compete given that I have an elite asset at almost every position. That's how I would have thought of it. But that's not exactly how it worked out. I would have taken Brock Purdy as well, who went at 4.09, just a couple picks before my next pick. I would have wanted to lock in another young QB. I was thinking Jared Goff. Clearly, somebody I wasn't too far off, considering David jumped in there, traded into the fifth round and wanted to go get Goff. I decided to go a different route. I decided to, this is a three wide receiver league. So I wanted to snag another upside wide receiver with youth that I believe in. I really wanted to go Tank Dell here. I was really shocked that he went at 5-1. But again, I think all of us are on kind of a similar page with values here. So I decided to go Jackson Smith and Jigba. I still have really high hopes for him. I think he's a really great receiver. I think that he's shown enough in his first year in a really, really star-studded wide receiver room to give me hopes that he's going to take a bigger role in year two and potentially reach the heights that we want to see. I'm definitely not discouraged enough to fade Jackson Smith and Jigba past the 5.02, but I definitely did give up on some of those savvy vets. I mean, even a DK Metcalf, a Devontae Adams. I just didn't feel like for this team build, selecting aging wide receivers was going to be a benefit to this team in year two or year three in terms of either gaining value, making moves, or really the production that I'm going to need long term. I was struggling here at the 502 with Zay Flowers or Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think both these guys are really electric, but I'm just kind of betting on the talent with Jackson Smith and Jigba in that, they get the QB situation right, and I think he'll be just fine. I do think that Flowers is a little bit limited when Mark Andrews comes back, and just by the nature of the offense and that there's not like an immense amount of volume going around. I think I skipped T. Higgins here at the 411, but T. Higgins is pretty much a smash for me at the 411. I think very highly of him. I think he's a lot like Keenan Allen in that he's been injured over the course of a couple seasons, and he's not injury prone because that's not really a thing. And when he's not injured anymore, he's just going to be awesome. Like anytime he's not injured and on the field, he's awesome. So it's like if he just has one full season, I don't think that we're going to be looking at him the same way we look at him right now as a devalued dynasty asset. So I probably would take him over Rashee Rice anyway. But I like T. Higgins in this spot pretty much in a vacuum outside of Purdy pretty much falling to me there. So I think a lot of people see T. Higgins as a replaceable wide receiver, but I do think he has a ton of upside. He could land on another team this offseason. And even if he's back with the Bengals, that's not all that bad as long as he's healthy. Okay, so after missing on the top tight ends and locking in a group of young, productive wide receivers, I have my running back one. I have a solid quarterback. I don't want another running back. I don't want to force a tight end here now that I've missed out on the elite group. But I got to tell you, I was thinking David Njoku in general, but I was thinking David Njoku a couple rounds later, not in the seventh. I was thinking I could fade the tight end position a little bit, but again, this group is sharp, and I should have known better. But either way, I decided to go Jake Moody here, which is the 110, and I double tapped the picks. I went 110 and 111, again bypassing up a Stephon Diggs, who I do think is aging out. Terry McLaurin I like a good bit, but he's 28. His situation's not super secure. Maybe they get Drake May in there and it all works out. Maybe not. But either way, I felt like with my team build, I got to just let me lean into this youth. Let me lean into it. So I went to 110, 111 as the picks were kind of flying off the board. Then another tight end, a mini tight end run happens with Njoku and Kittle. And I'm not going to get a tight end here. And the most shocking thing that happens to me next is the trio of Baker Mayfield, Daniel Jones, and Will Levis. Like, I could not have expected those three quarterbacks to go this early. Now, Baker Mayfield, that one is totally reasonable, but Daniel Jones at 7-6 is wild to me. And just because he might not have a job next year, let alone 2 years from now. But Will Levis, tons of uncertainty there before a guy like Kirk Cousins. And as soon as those three went, I just knew I wasn't getting to Kirk Cousins or Matt Stafford. So I was definitely concerned about the build out here because as much as if you listen to any of my other content, I've definitely talked about Russell Wilson last year and I believe in him. And I thought that he played pretty well last year. I didn't think that he was the sole issue, or really, I didn't think that he was the symptom that was causing all the issues in Denver. I thought he actually played pretty well, and I think that he's going to get a job this year. Russell Wilson was definitely a target of mine, but I would have liked to have a more secure option like a Matt Stafford, and I would have liked to have maybe double tapped here Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, but one way or another, that QB run really worried me that I wasn't even going to get Russell Wilson back here. So I just felt like I do believe Russell Wilson will have a job. I do think he played well. I do think he has a couple more years left in this league. So that's a decent investment at the 8-11, if nothing else, to potentially sell him when his value does pick back up for, something greater. Maybe I can get a couple firsts out of him, something like that. If he lands in Atlanta, I mean, come on, wheels up to the moon, right? What are we talking about here? So I think that there is a way that Russell Wilson builds back a good deal of dynasty value. But man, that run of QBs really hurt. It definitely did. I thought I was going to have a shot at a Matthew Stafford, a Kirk Cousins, or a Baker Mayfield. I really thought that could happen, but it just wasn't in the cards for me. Aaron Jones goes after me, which I was pretty happy with. I'm not going for running back here. Aaron Rodgers, I probably would have taken him if he came back around, just seeing the QB market in this league and seeing what was happening. But I do think I might be right next to a Green Bay Packers fan here. Shout out Brandon Blanco here. He goes double Aaron, and I'm left with a decision to make here. Do I force another QB? Do I reach for another QB, which is not something I'm comfortable doing, something I clearly did not do here? Or do I go for a high upside young wide receiver and kind of lean into the youth again? And that's not always a great idea. It's not always the best idea. Like a guy like Chris Godwin, 27 years old, has a couple years left in the league, or plenty of years left in the league. And so does Deontay Johnson. They have a good amount of life left, a good career left in the NFL. And I like a Deontay Johnson for sure. Keenan Allen, absolutely stud wide receiver. Could I potentially sell him for something while he's balling midseason? There's options here for sure. But I do feel like outside of that, I do feel like Josh Downs over Dotson, Watson, Brown, Ridley is perfectly reasonable. Perfectly reasonable. And, this kid was injured, had a really, really solid season. Okay. He put up 600 plus yards. I believe it was 700 yards. Really solid season with backup quarterback Gardner Minshew. This is a guy who eats up short area targets and can create big plays down the field. And I think Anthony Richardson will lean into a binky type player like that. So for me, it just kind of organically happened where I was able to stack Josh Downs with Anthony Richardson. It wasn't like the plan or the reason I really like Josh Downs. It may have been a slight reach here, though. I will admit that totally. Slight reach with the build that I'm doing, leaning into the youth, a year 2 type build. I can afford to take some shots with some young talent and upside like a Josh Downs. So my plan coming around here at the 10 spot was going for Michael Mayer, to be honest. I got sniped a good deal in this draft, so it was a heartbreaker. a couple different times. Where it was a heartbreaker coming around to my pick a few different times in this draft. Michael Mayer goes one pick right before me, but fortunately, Pat Freiermuth is right there, and I'm pretty happy to get Pat Freiermuth in the 10th round of a dynasty startup with a tight end premium. I do think that we are fading the Pittsburgh Steelers in general a bit much. This guy's 25 years old. We've seen him be really, really good. If they get the QB situation right in any capacity, I mean, I think we're going to be just fine and happy with the production Freiermuth is giving you. But also, again, he's 25. He has a ton of career left, and he could easily end up on another team at some point. And I'm just not willing to give up on Pat Freiermuth. I think this is a great spot for him, especially when you don't have a tight end at all. To have him as your tight end one in the 10th is not so bad. I really would have liked to have a Jake Anderson or something like that. But again, tight ends were flying off the board here a lot faster than I expected them to be. At 11-12, I smashed the 206. Trying to load up on picks here. I do think that, picks are one of the few assets that you're going to get in dynasty drafts that are almost guaranteed to gain value, at least first and second round picks from now until the NFL draft or until the season starts. So I think draft picks carry a lot of liquidity, and that's why I think I value them a little bit more in this area than like a Dallas Goedert or, an aging out Joe Mixon, Tony Pollard. Like, I do think Najee Harris is a pretty good pick here in the 11th round. But again, he's also getting in that 26-year-old range. And look, there's still value in that. But I do think for some reason we're forgetting. I just feel like a lot of people are leaning into some of these older running backs as values. And I do think we're forgetting that age cliff is real with the running backs, and they can fall off, and they will fall off hard. I mean, even Nick Chubb in the 12th was kind of a shocker to me. Even if you're going for like a contending type build, I'm just not sure he's going to get you there. And look, I'll self-evaluate. I'll take some criticism for sure. And I'll give myself a taste of my own medicine here as I, take shots at other people's picks, and no shade at anybody. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm literally just honestly, genuinely going through this draft and, trying to break it down the best I can, and, how my draft was impacted by what was going on. And I disagree and agree with some of what happened. That's how it goes. So my next pick here, Dontavian Wicks. I mean, definitely, this could be qualified as a reach for sure over guys like, Kendre Miller with a lot of upside. You could say Quentin Johnson, who has that first round draft capital. He still has plenty of value left in Dynasty. Maybe you believe in a Treylon Burks, but personally, what I've seen from Dontavian Wicks, what I've seen from Jordan Love, I'm really excited. So I'm willing here in the 12th round, where things are getting really uncertain, to take a shot on a guy like Wicks, who had a great rookie season, proved to me that he should be, a starter on that team. And I think that he's going to be the wide receiver 2 or 3. And that's pretty valuable, I think, in that Jordan Love offense. Next here is Zamir White. This is my second running back overall in this draft. Zamir White. Not because I love Zamir White. Again, I'm fading running back as much as I can because I do think the guys who went before, like a Joe Mixon, these are a couple of rounds before. I don't think that they have that much dynasty value left. I'm not sure that they have that much NFL life left in them. So personally, I'd rather bet on a Zamir White who could gain value from, between now and August and through the season. So Zamir White, just kind of a smash pick here to me with, Josh Jacobs likely on the outs. I think we're going to see, a season where White gets a pretty decent workload. Not saying he's going to be the RB1 for sure. They'll definitely add another running back. They do that all the time, but he's one of those zero hero running back targets that you go after for sure. And I think this is a reasonable spot for him here, when I think, third round picks or second round, I think late second round picks were going here. So I could have taken a second round pick. I could have, dove into that rookie value. But I think White carries enough value where you could kind of re-roll the dice into a second or something like that, and maybe potentially more if he hits in the season. Right now, you go through the draft and you can see that there are some other teams who are set up to compete this year and win this year, but you never know what happens. So when I'm building this team, I'm not saying I'm definitely not winning this year, but I'm saying I want to take the most value possible. And if that means leaning into the youth, then that means leaning into the youth. I'm not going to force anything. And that's something I really try to stay true to. At my next pick here, I took Jerome Ford. I honestly thought that he would have gone like right after Zamir White. So, I feel pretty comfortable taking Jerome Ford and Zamir White back to back, having that as my running back 2 spot. While, I'm filling in everything else, I think, with high-end wide receiver talent, and then filling in the gaps with some high-end picks if I can, with the 110 and 111. Maybe I trade those, maybe I hit on those and I trust my film evals. We'll see what happens there. But I like this build for the hero zero running back, getting Zamir White and Jerome Ford rounds 13 and rounds 14. Okay, round 15 here. I felt like the tight end value was kind of similar. There wasn't anything I was super, super interested in going after. We're getting into like the third round picks. We're getting into Greg Dulcich territory, which not comfortable taking that at all. So I traded back here. I kind of knew exactly what David was going after because I do think Schultz would have been the guy if I got stuck sitting there, because I think Schultz is going to be back in Houston. So I do think that's a good pick. But again, a little bit older, uncertain. He might not be in Houston that much longer. So if it wasn't, that would have been kind of a bad pick given my team build. So I like Cade Otton a lot. I think what he's done is pretty impressive his first 2 seasons. He did it with Brady, and then he did it with Baker Mayfield. Really good showing in the playoffs to end the season. I like being able to trade back and grab Cade Otton at the 16.1 over here. That felt good to me. I got another pick in the 16th round when moving back. I think we swapped like 23rd picks and something like that in the 23rd round. And I took Elijah Moore. I think Elijah Moore has some upside still. He's 23 years old, playing with Deshaun Watson. Like I was never the biggest believer, but just in this spot, he kind of felt like the right pick here, like the most valuable pick. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Like there's definitely plenty others, like Dameon Pierce could have qualified. There's some others in here. Maybe you go a pick, maybe Aiden O'Connell's more valuable. I don't know, but I think Elijah Moore here was one of the more valuable dynasty assets left. So I slammed that and felt pretty good about it. My next pick, I went for another pick. I believe I went for my next pick. I went for another rookie pick. I believe this was a 306 that I went for. Again, just in this range after Dameon Pierce went, that was going to be my next target. And I just felt like there wasn't much left that I would rather have over a pick, to be honest. That's really the best way to put it. My next pick came in the 18th round. David had my 17.2. He went AJ Dillon. My 18-11, I went Gardner Minshew. I felt good about Gardner Minshew here. I think that, first of all, could they bring him back to Indianapolis? And could I just have the backup quarterback to my starting quarterback? And Gardner Minshew has been, just fine fantasy-wise when starting. Now, not the best. He's had some down games, but he definitely has shown some ability to keep your head above water if things go south. So I like that aspect of it. If not, he's done enough this year to get another high-end backup role and or potentially start somewhere. There's a lot of open QB jobs. So I like Gardner Minshew a lot in the 18th here after guys like Mac Jones, Jared Stidham, Ryan Tannehill, Sam Howell. Like I'd probably rather Minshew, to be honest with you. Evan Hull, just shooting my shot here. I like Evan Hull. Loved him coming out. I have a film review about him on the Dynasty Underdog channel. That was like the one I posted there after I posted, and then subsequently posted all the rest on the Dynasty Football Factory YouTube channel last year, but you can catch them all on the Dynasty Underdog channel this year. Evan Hull, thought he was a really, really effective runner in college, also an effective pass catcher. He also just has like A+ effort. If you saw him at the combine, he ran like every single drill down to the end zone. So just an impressive kid. And I think, the injury derailed his first season, but I do think he's going to be the backup to Jonathan Taylor. So I like that pick there. I'm clearly leaning into this Indianapolis offense here. And it wasn't even super intentional, really. But Alec Pierce in the 20th round, again, we could kind of cut it off here, to be honest with you. I'm not just going to cut it off like that. We could cut it off here because you're really getting into the point where you're just shooting shots and you're hoping that something hits. You're throwing darts at a dartboard and you have a blindfold on and you're just hoping something hits because there's zero certainty at this range. We saw, Kadarius Toney didn't even play in the Super Bowl. He went, 21.8 over here, right? Like at this point, you'd rather, I'm sure half the other players that went around him. We're splitting hairs here down in the 20th round, but I do like Alec Pierce. And I think, just pairing him with Anthony Richardson is fine to do. I added a couple more picks in the 21st, 22nd round. Again, at this point, I would just rather reroll dice on all these players and go take a pick. I think these were a couple late thirds, and I'm taking some fourths later on. So I'm just loading up on picks at this point if I can. I took a Parker Washington because I like what he did at the end of the season. I thought he was a really good prospect. Michael Gallup in the 24th round could be valuable. He's still fairly young, fighting with Brandon Cooks a little bit for some work last year. He has some life left in him in the 24th round. I think he has more value than a lot of these players. I was kind of surprised to see him there, but I'm not like overly excited about a Michael Gallup or anything, right? That's not what I'm getting at here. In terms of my draft, I thought that it was a pretty challenging draft in general. Usually at the back end here, I can find some more value. Usually I find my way to an elite tight end. I really didn't feel like there was a lot of trades to be made on my end. I tried to make some moves. I thought some of the moves that were made were a little expensive, so the market got set in a way that didn't allow me to maneuver the way that I felt was most beneficial to me, where I wasn't giving up too much value. So I just felt like I was going to have to give up too much value to move around, and therefore I missed out on the elite tight end in the rookie draft. And subsequently, I was okay to kind of lean into that path after being pushed down it, because I do think Anthony Richardson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, those three core pieces give me a lot of room to breathe in terms of building this team. And I think T. Higgins and Jackson Smith and Jigba have a lot of life left in them. And if, JSN hits at all, then that's another core piece, hoping that I can, maneuver the board a little bit, maybe with these first round picks. Maybe I can trade them for something that solidifies a position on my team. And obviously, I think the most important piece of this team to get figured out over the next year here is my quarterback 2 position. If I can get that solid, then I can probably manage all the other spots and have a pretty competitive team here for a good bit, for a few years. And that's what I want. I want some sustained competitiveness, right? Where what I need to do after that is really just churn some of the ancillary pieces, and I have kind of my core pieces set, which obviously over time you're going to have to churn as well. But the hope is that you're managing that along the way, and you don't have to do that with an entire roster, and you can churn along the way. So that's always my goal when I build out my teams. But specifically with this one, leaning into the youth, it's going to be a year 2 type build. I guess you would call that kind of a productive struggle. But I'm looking at year 2 compete. That's how I'm looking at it. Now, we are doing a little self-evaluation here. So one thing to consider for sure is there anything I could have done differently that may have been more beneficial to my overall team build? And like, one thing to think about is, could I have opted, instead of Jahmyr Gibbs, going Sam Laporta and then maybe Kyron Williams at the next pick? Like, that's definitely a build I could have done, but I don't love it. Like, I really don't love it, just thinking about how it would have all played out. I mean, butterfly effect, a lot of things happen, but even just those 2 changes, I'm not sure I'm super comfortable with. So, I mean, maybe I have some self-bias in my original move, almost like the endowment effect. Like, I just, value my picks more, but I do think going that direction, although maybe it would have created more balance in looking at this team, like, oh, filled out all the positions with a little bit more typical structure, I'm not sure that I would have been comfortable having Kyron Williams there. And I'm just wondering if I can potentially piece together the tight end production I need, or maybe tier up from Freiermuth if he has, a start to his, a really good start to his season, or even between now and April, can I trade Freiermuth in one of these picks for, a top end tight end, or tier up, or whatever it is. So there's more opportunity, I think, in that direction than getting into the tier 1 of running backs, which I felt was something I needed to prioritize. But there was definitely something when I looked at this draft, I was like, what if I went tight end instead of Gibbs? And I'm not sure there was much else I could have really done otherwise. I mean, I could have maybe went one of the tight ends instead of Higgins, Pitts, Hawkinson. Is anybody going to feel great about that? I don't think so. So, I mean, I could have gone Dell over Higgins, which, in hindsight, maybe Higgins falls back to me and I get Dell and Higgins, which is kind of what I wanted anyway. But for some reason, I just thought Dell was going to make it back, but it didn't work out that way. Now that I've gone through my entire team build and kind of my decision-making process throughout the entire draft, I just want to hit on a couple positional notes. One I already kind of touched on, but I was a little shocked about the QB run in the 7th round. And just in general, I think that if you want to have some stability at your quarterback 2 position, you're going to need to get up into that like 4th round or above range with an extra pick to really feel comfortable about your overall build. And that's something that I just haven't really prioritized enough, I think, in any of my builds. So I think going forward, I'm going to try to prioritize that and make sure that I'm not, left behind in the QB race while everybody gets ahead of it. I do think that that's been a mistake of mine. Another note, I want to handle my running back position pre-round 4. Post round 4, it just gets real dicey. There's not a lot of certainty, and it's just not a position I'm willing to prioritize. We dropped an episode talking about evaluating risk recently, and this is one of the ways I evaluate risk. I don't allow myself to get caught up in dying or aging out running back production or uncertain running back assets. It's just not something that I'm willing to invest in Dynasty. Last thing I'll mention is there seems to be a lot of uncertainty in rounds 4 through 6 for wide receivers. George Pickens, Jaden Reed, Nico. There are a lot of players I want to avoid in this range and a lot of value I find after these rounds. So those are the positional notes I have. I don't need to go on too long about it. I just wanted to share some of the general findings as I went through and reviewed this Dynasty startup draft. Thanks everybody for joining me for our first startup draft review of the offseason. I plan to do more startups. I plan to have more reviews, mock draft reviews, rookie mock draft reviews, ton of stuff planned. Tune into our other shows, our main shows, tune into our ranking symposium. We have a ton of content coming out, and I'm really excited about it all. So thanks again for joining, and I'll catch you next time. Peace out.